Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is this right here. So if that looks exciting to you guys, please carry on and watch the video. Oh, and just one more thing before we go. Please consider like, commenting, and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. But now with all that out of the way, let's carry on with the video. Okay, so starting off with our Dwarf summoner here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to start off with her flesh, and so to do that we're going to start off with some tan flesh. And of course the great thing about these wizkids models is they're already pre-primed, so we don't even have to worry about priming, we can get straight into the painting. So starting off with our tan flesh, and of course all we want to do is paint over the areas where we can see all of her skin showing. So in this miniature it's just the face and the hands, some nice easy couple of places that we need to pick out here with the colour. Okay, so once we have our skin picked out, we're going to come in now with some charred brown. And for the charred brown, all we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking out the staff in her hand. Since it's a nice wooden staff that's clearly been carved from a tree, we want to go with a nice dark wood here. But of course, any wood brown colour will do here for yours. But me specifically, I want a nice dark wooden staff for her. Then once we have that picked out, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to come in with some stonewall grey. And we're going to be placing it just on a few places on the miniature here. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting all of her underclothes. She actually has 3 layers of clothing on her. So what we're going to be doing is going around the miniature and picking out the undermost layer in our stonewall grey here to give it a nice sort of neutral base colour for the rest of the colours we're going to be applying to the miniature. I know it may be a little bit hard to see right now since the Stonewall Grey is very, very similar to the grey primer that they use on these wizkids models, but just be aware if you are doing it the same colour I am, that you really want to get in there, take a closer look at where you want to be applying this, and making sure that you get it on there and you're not just seeing any primer underneath. Then once we have those grey areas picked out, what we're going to be doing now is going to come in with some crusted saw, which is a nice deep reddish purpley colour. I'm going to be applying this to the second layer of clothing, and it's a little bit hard to see on camera where all these layers of clothing are, so hopefully with me painting in the areas, if you're following along, is going to be a lot more helpful than me telling you where they are. But there is some distinct layers of the clothing that she's wearing, so just going around trying to find roughly where that second layer of clothing is and painting that in. Then once we have that second layer of clothing all painted up, we're going to come in now with some mephiston red, which is going to be our top layer, so everything that's basically on top. Now, it may get a little confusing when you're trying to work out what layers of clothing you want, but truly it's up to you where you want to apply these colours or what colours you want to apply at all. But she does have quite a few layers of cloth and clothing over her, so making them all different colours is going to help give the piece some visual interest and help make it stand out on the actual miniature itself. Okay, so once we've done that last layer of red, we're going to come in now with some black grey. And there is one more little layer of clothing that she has sort of up around her, sort of like on a mantle around her neck, just underneath where her hair meets the actual clothing itself. There is another layer of clothing, so we're going to be painting that there in the dark grey. Okay, now we have all those layers of her clothing done. We're going to come in now with some rhinox hide, and we're going to be applying this to the belt around her waist. And you want to come in here with a nice fine tip brush, as fine a tip as you can get, because this little belt around her waist is very, very thin, and it could be quite tricky to come in and paint it, especially since we've got a lot of light colours with our reds around the area. So just take your time and get as much brush control as you can. Okay, so now we have that picked out. We're going to come in now with some khaki. And we're going to be using khaki for our Dwarf summoners here. I'm going to give it sort of a sandy, blondie, brownish tone, and khaki is going to be a good colour for that. I'm not quite 100% going for blonde because I usually use skeleton bone for doing a blonde colour. I want it to be a little bit different to that, so I'm going to come in here and use khaki. But remember, it's her hair colour, so you can use whatever colour you like. But I'm going with sort of a blonde hair colour to help contrast against the whole miniature. Then once we have her hair picked out, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to come in with some brassy brass. And there is only a couple of places that we want to apply this brassy brass. She has a nice sort of circlet slash crown around her head, so we want to make sure we get that in the nice brassy brass. And as well as that, we also want to get her front belt buckle that of course she's wearing around her waist. Now I am coming in with a very fine brush again to do this because they are very small bits of detail, especially that circlet around the back of her head. It does go the whole way around, so you want to be very careful when you're picking this out and try and get your hand as steady as possible. As you can see, I'm bracing one of my hand on the other to try and keep a nice steady brush stroke. Then once we've painted up those metallic parts, what we're going to be doing now is coming in with some monster brown. And all I'm going to be doing with this monster brown is I'm just going to be applying it to the base of our miniature, which I've just placed some sand and gravel and fine bits of rocks from my driveway, stuck it onto the miniature to paint up to give it a little bit more basing than what it originally has. But this is a totally optional step whether you want to do this or not. Then once we've painted up that little bit of basing material, what we're going to be doing now is coming in with some reikland fleshshade. And of course we want to be applying this to the skin of our dwarf here. And I'm being pretty careful with this because I don't want to have it spill off anywhere else. And I'm using a bit of a smaller brush than I would usually for applying any washes, just because I want to be a little bit more selective since she is a small dwarf woman and quite small on the miniature, so I don't need such a big brush to cover the whole thing in a wash. Then once that's dry, what we're going to be doing is we're going to come in with some seraphim sepia now, and I'm going to be using this to apply over our dwarf summoners here. So to give that nice sort of a lot more sort of blonde the hair effect that I'm trying to go for here, sort of a bit yellowish blonde, but that seraphim sepia is going to really help it out. As well as that, I'm just going over the brassy brass with it as well, as it's going to help give it that sort of goldish tone as well. Then once that wash is completely dry, we're going to come in now with some red tone, and we're going to be applying this just over the most upper layer, the place where we place the mephiston red of her clothing. So just the upper layer of her clothing here. We just want to deepen that in red, and we're not going to give a wash over the whole thing. I don't want to tint the whole thing red. Same with that crusted sword, which is a reddy purple as well. We're just leaving that out for now, and we're just placing it onto the mephiston red areas. Then once that's completely dry, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to come in with some nuln oil, and this is the wash that we're going to be placing on pretty much the rest of the areas we haven't done. So we want to be placing on that crusted saw color that we've gotten, our stonewall grey, all of the other layers of clothing, so we can darken all those down, and it'll give that red layer that we just applied in the last step a bit more pop against these two. So it's going to help separate out the colors a little bit once all the washes are completely dry. Then once that's completely dry, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to come in with some agrax earthshade. And for our agrax earthshade, we're only going to be applying this in two areas. I want to be applying it over our wooden staff that we've got in here to help deepen that earth color that we need. And as well as that, I'm also going to be applying it to the actual base itself to help give it the earthy sort of realistic ground texture that we want as well. So just giving a nice overall coverage in those areas. Then once we have that all nice and dry, we can come in with some highlighting now. So coming back in with our mephiston red, and of course we want to be applying it to the uppermost areas where the sun is naturally going to hit. This does have some nice folds and wrinkles into the clothing, so I'm just picking out the most highest raised ones. And as well as that, you can also see that I'm coming in with a very fine tip brush, and I'm just picking them out carefully, one by one, going around all the miniature, just picking out all those nice raised edges. It'll take a little bit of time doing this, but don't worry, it's going to look nice in the end. Then once we have all those red highlights done, what we're going to be doing now is going to come back in with some khaki, and we're going to be using it to, of course, highlight up the strands of her hair. Now, she does have a few strands that definitely stand out, that are nicely sculpted into the miniature. So those are the ones that I'm going to be hitting with our pure khaki color, so it looks like that sun is coming in and hitting it nicely onto those strands and really giving it a lot of depth and visual interest to the hair on herself. Then once we've highlighted up her hair, what we're going to do now is come back in with our crusted saw color, and we want to be placing it in the area where we had the crusted saw, which is the second layer of clothing that we had on our dwarf summoner here. And you can see again with our small fine tip brush, and I'm just picking out just the raised areas since we've got that nice dark wash for the shadowed areas, and it's going to really just help give out that little bit of pop to the miniature. Then once we have that complete, what we're going to be doing now is coming back in with some charred brown, and of course we're going to be doing the exact same thing, which is just hitting the edges and the parts that would nicely hit the sun. So it's got some flat surfaces that are clearly facing towards the sun, so I'm being a little bit more heavy-handed there, and then just picking out some smaller bits just over the other parts of the staff. Then once we've completed that, we're going to come in now with some tanned flesh, doing the exact same thing that we've just been doing with our highlights, is hitting those raised areas. Now for the flesh, we want to be hitting the areas that are raised, like just the edge of the nose, the bottom of the chin, maybe a little bit around the cheeks, being very, very careful since she's a very small model and a lot of paint can definitely mess up pretty quickly, so just being very, very careful where to place these highlights, and with a thinner paint as I possibly can on the actual brush itself. Then once we have that complete, we've got just one last piece of the miniature that we haven't touched, and we're going to use some magost purple to do this, and that's paint up her magic effect. Now I love using contrast paints on these spell effects that the wizkids models have on them. The contrast paint is sort of like a heavy wash, so you still get to see that clear under color detail and give off that clear effect that they're trying to go for, these wizkids models. And applying contrast paints, as you can see, I'm also adding a talassar blue to this as well, giving it sort of a bluish purple effect, and it's totally up to you what color you want to do these. But I'm hoping I can get sort of a mixture between the two colors. I'm not sure how well contrast paints mix together once they're dry, but we'll see in the final result. And with all that complete, we have now finally finished painting up our female dwarf summoner from the Pathfinder Battles wizkids range. And you can see she's going to be a nice standout piece on the table. So I hope this has been helpful for you guys, whether you want to follow along or you just enjoy me painting up some cool miniatures. But with all that said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.